This tech tip video will look at how to transfer geometry from Revit to the IESVE using the Pollination plugin. It follows on from the video on transferring geometry from Revit to the VE. We're starting with a Revit model, which has already been prepared for export by having rooms or spaces placed within it, as shown in the Revit to VE video. We'll go to the Pollination tab and click on Export Model. This opens the Pollination tool, which takes us through the process step by step. For the first step, we need to consider the settings for our export. Make sure that the boundary location is set to at wall center. This is to ensure that there are no gaps between adjacent room volumes. It's recommended to tick Computes Volumes to enable this option for more complex geometry calculations. For the next step, we consider the building apertures. We can select which building elements we want to export as translucent, remembering that anything translucent will be treated as a window in the VE. Aside from window selection, we can also include curtain walls and even selected wall elements if we need them to be translucent. Next, we consider the levels. Here, we can see that in addition to the usual options of rooms or spaces, the Pollination tool provides an additional option for our geometry source to be set by areas. This is because Pollination has a direct export to GEM files as the native format for IESVE geometry, rather than using the GBXML format constraints. For the geometry calculation, we have two options: extruded floors or full volume. If we choose the extruded floors option, it will uniformly extrude the space without factoring in boundaries or other surfaces. If the extrusion height is not set, then the software will attempt to do this automatically, so it's better to do it ourselves to ensure accuracy. For this example, we'll select full volume for the geometry calculation. We then get a list of all of the spaces in the model by level which have been selected for export. If we're happy with this list, we can visualize our model using the Preview tool. Here we see that our model has a gap in it, which would cause an error in our VE export. The gap is where the first floor slab construction should be. It's here because the ground floor ceiling void included the thickness of the floor slab. We selected full volumes to calculate our geometry for this space, so the space is stopping at the underside of the floor slab. To correct this error, we can use extruded shape for this floor only. First, we go back to our Revit model and measure the space height that we want, so that we can set the extrusion distance. We measure from the top of the ceiling void to the top of the floor slab and get 1200 millimeters. We can now go back to the Pollination tool to step 4, where we select the ground floor ceiling void and change the geometry calculation to extruded floors. Then enter the extrusion height that we just measured as 1200. Now, if we preview our model, we can see that the gap is no longer there. The next step gives us the option to include shading items, such as the roof. We click on the plus to add shades. Now, we can select our roof elements in the Revit model view. Once the shades have been added, we have a tick box option to detach them individually. Note that if a shade is detached, it will be imported into the VE as a neighboring building. But if the detached option is not ticked, it will be imported as a local shade. The next step gives us options for sensor grid selection, which we won't use in this example. Then we have an option to set properties at building and at room level, which we won't change now. With all the steps complete, we can now export our model. We can choose to export as a GBXML file or in the VE Native Geometry GEM file format. The GEM file format will usually provide a more accurate geometry exchange. However, using GBXML allows data to be transferred from Revit to the VE in addition to the geometry. For this example, we will export using the gem file format. Now, we switch to the VE. On the Start page, under New Project, we choose the option to create from BIM file. Once we've selected the gem file we just created, various import options become available. There's a brief explanation of each option on this screen. For this example, we'll pick the default option of geometry plus assigned data. Then we click on Create Project. When the project is created, it will automatically open in the VE, where we can see that our model geometry has been successfully imported from the gem file. We can see the geometry in the main window and all the space names listed in the model tree. We can also use the model viewer for a quick visual check of our import from all sides. We would recommend that at this point you use the Model It drop-down menu to run a model report as an additional quality check on the geometry that has been imported. Thank you for watching this video on how to quickly use the Pollination export tool from Revit and then import this gem file into the VE to set the model geometry. For further hints and tips on the VE, please check out our other Tech Tips videos.